Welcome back everyone. Time to do a little bit of a late 2020 review of a phone that came out back in 2018. Now this specific phone, I'm pretty sure a lot of you already know what type of phone it is, but it is the Samsung Galaxy S9 Plus. Now what this phone was back in the day, just a couple of years ago, this phone was, like I said before, one of those phones that I saw and I looked at that time and I was like, how much more of a device could somebody get beyond this? How much better of a phone can we get? And honestly, a lot of things have changed, and I'm not sitting here saying this phone was perfect at that time, but it really did age pretty well. I mean, this thing aged extremely good for a 2018 device. However, there are some aspects of this phone that I'm not 100% too fond of anymore, but regardless, I think it was an important piece in Samsung's lineup, and this was right in the middle between a really big change and another really big change, which was the Galaxy S8 and the Galaxy S10 for sure. Now, you can pick up these things in Amazon for a little bit cheaper than I thought. For sure you can get them for less than $400 in a lot of places, and on Amazon you can pick them up sometimes for less than $300, which I think is a pretty decent pickup for sure. So if you want to pick one up, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there and help support the channel at the same time. Now looking on the front of the Samsung Galaxy S9 Plus, you'll have a 6.2-inch Super AMOLED display, and it's a 1440p panel. And I've said this before and I'll say it again, this phone's one of its biggest assets, maybe the biggest asset of this device. There is so much quality with this panel, and the fact that it doesn't even have that much bezel, it definitely has some bezel compared to today's phones. Things like the hole punch displays with the Galaxy S20, the OnePlus 8 and 8T, all these devices definitely look better than the S9 Plus, but it's really not too far behind it. With a phone like an S9 Plus, you have so much quality, you have so much depth in that panel, deep blacks, all that good stuff, and there's really not that much to hate on it. Yes, phones nowadays are better, but this one is perfectly fine, and for a lot of people out there, you would be hard pressed to find people who would complain about this specific panel. Now you do have, the home button gesture-based design with One UI 2.5 now, which is really nice, and you have that USB Type-C port on the bottom, headphone jack of this phone as well, and you have a microSD card slot on this device as well, which is another huge asset. Like I said before, asset on asset with this specific device. Even though it's a couple years old, it doesn't really feel or look like a super old device. And on the back, you have that glass back, which is something I really do like, with wireless charging on the back, which is nice, fingerprint sensor, and then that dual camera setup, which I kind of like, to be honest, and I'll go and hit on it right now. You have a dual camera setup, like I stated. You have that 12 megapixel wide angle lens, and then a 12 megapixel telephoto lens, which I'll be honest, I'm not a super huge fan of telephoto lenses. I think they're cool, and I'd rather have a telephoto lens than not telephoto lens. But I think for a lot of people out there, they may prefer something with a little bit more use to it, and something like an ultra-wide sensor would be better. But regardless, I will tell you, the camera quality of this thing is actually pretty good. You can do 4K at 60 on the back, which is great, but on the front, you do have an 8 megapixel sensor, and then a 2 megapixel eye scanner or whatever, and you can only do 1440p videos on the front camera. So there are some quality differences between this phone and phones that have came out in the past and phones that are coming out now. There is definitely some huge improvements that we've gone, especially with the Galaxy S20 having that 8K capability. I think that is something that's really awesome. And when you look at a lot of devices across the board, some of them aren't really getting that same type of quality at the end of the day. So that's another really big thing. But with the Galaxy S9 Plus, the quality of the photos look pretty good. The video quality is really good as well. But I think for a lot of people out there, doing the 4K at 60 is more than enough. And I think the quality and video and photo quality and the features behind this camera are more than enough for a lot of people. I just think with that front camera is probably where a lot of the changes people may want changes in the front camera department. And I always felt like Samsung, if they really tried, they could really perfect that front camera. But for some reason, they don't want to do it. I don't know what it is with them. They seem to make smaller and smaller lenses every year, increase the megapixel count, but keep the quality pretty consistent. I don't really know why they do that. But with this phone, the back camera is perfect. I think for a lot of people, for a 2018 device, is it the best camera? Absolutely not. And I take that back. It's not even perfect, but for a 2-year-old device, it really hasn't aged that much. I just wish it really had an ultra-wide sensor and, both a telephoto and ultra-wide. That would have been awesome. Unfortunately, we don't really have that capability here. But like I said before, for the camera department, the Galaxy S9 Plus, I think, is good enough have for a lot of people for sure. Now, software wise, this is, like I said before, this phone's probably the worst aspect of this specific phone. It started off with Android 8. Right now it is on Android 10. It's not getting Android 11, which this thing only got a couple versions of Android. Now, Samsung has since increased their longevity of their devices, which is nice. So we're now getting like an extra year of software support for a lot of, Samsung phones. But the cutoff was the Samsung Galaxy S10. So any phones that are older than the Galaxy S10, unfortunately, are not going to be getting any more extra software updates. They're definitely going to be finishing up the rest of the software updates they have. But it's kind of sad in my opinion. I honestly was expecting maybe a little bit more from Samsung. Maybe just, increase the longevity of all the devices that were currently supported. But that was not the case. So it is what it is. Like I said before, there's nothing we can really do about it. But that would have been a really awesome thing had Samsung done it at that time. But it's totally understandable. They did what they did. One UI 2.5 is now my favorite version of software out there. It's honestly one of my least favorite, to be completely honest, beyond like the Xiaomi and Huawei, skins they have on their devices. But it would have been cool if Samsung steps away from their skins and they, kind of go back to, or not back to, but move back to stock Android in some fashion. Doesn't seem to be the case, but you can still install a, custom launcher or whatever on it. But that pretty much covers it up in the software standpoint. Now, performance-wise, this thing does have that Qualcomm Snapdragon 845 chipset, an octa-core CPU, and Adreno 630 GPU, and 6 gigabytes of RAM on all the models that are supported. Now, it does have a microSD card slot, so the storage models doesn't really matter too much, but I would definitely tell you when it comes down to the RAM portion, it's actually pretty good. It has a good enough amount of RAM to still sustain a lot of apps that are coming out and a lot of apps that have already came out. Now, is it perfect? Absolutely not. The, performance isn't really as stable. It's not really the smoothest, but it still definitely is fairly fast for the most part. Because it is on Android 10, it's not on like some super outdated version of Android. So you're still going to be having a lot of apps that are suitable, a lot of features within this phone, and it's still pretty current. It's not an old device by any means. But as I've said before, and I'll say it again, the biggest problem with Samsung devices, especially with these type of phones like the Galaxy S9, Galaxy S8, even maybe the Galaxy S10 series, is the smoothness factor. It's just not as smooth as something like a OnePlus device or an iOS device. You're just not getting that smoothness factor behind these devices. I think they're fast, and that's where Samsung really has perfected it in. It's definitely a fast phone that'll last a long time in terms of the speed and performance, and it's going to be on top of, one of the fastest phones ever that comes out for that year, but it's definitely not the smoothest. I think, iOS is number 1, OnePlus is number 2, maybe the Pixel devices is number 3, and then followed by typically, Samsung or what other devices, number 4, 5, 6. So it's really not that smooth, which is something I'm really sad about. I like a smooth experience. I like a consistent experience, something that I can boot on my phone and know it's going to be this fast or this slow. With Samsung, I know it's going to be fast, but I know the smoothness is not going to be there. So I think this phone still has a lot of speed and performance if you load games, apps, all that stuff. And there's quite a bit of RAM in this thing for a 2018 device. But I just wouldn't, consistently, recommend this thing if you want the smoothest device out there. So definitely keep that in mind. So in terms of performance, that pretty much covers it up. Now, ending it off with the battery life. On release, this thing had a 3500 mAh battery. Now, if these batteries degrade over time, I don't have to tell you that. And unfortunately, mine's not at 3500. It's a little bit less than that because of degradation and all that. But it is what it is. It's not really a big deal, but it is something to kind of keep in mind at the end of the day. And I probably would say the battery life is pretty average nowadays, especially with the Android 10. I didn't really find One UI 2.5 being that great of an update for battery life. It was a better update for sure, but it didn't really increase or decrease the battery life that much. So definitely keep that in mind at the end of the day. But I think in the battery life department, it pretty much gets a, okay score for me nowadays. But to kind of sum up this video and to answer the question, is the Samsung Galaxy S9 Plus still worth it in the later part of 2020? Well, what I can tell you is that it really depends on your specific case, because like I said, for less than $300, this is a pretty decent phone for the most part. It's not perfect, but it does have a lot of capability behind it that really makes this phone a pretty decently strong contender for the most part. Like I stated, it's definitely not perfect, but I think for a lot of people out there, picking up a phone like this that's less than $300 is actually a pretty decent, idea. It's not going to give you the most perfect experience ever, but it's definitely going to get you by. And for how premium this phone feels, for the beautiful screen on the front, for the fast performance, but not the smoothness, but it's still a very fast performing device. For still software update for the time being, it's going to be outdated very soon, but it's still supported. For okay battery life, for the Samsung DeX experience, which is awesome, the microSD card slot, IP certification, and all that. I mean, it really is a good priced phone. It's not perfect, like I said, but it's, when I look at the phone and when I look at the price, I'm not saying to myself like, wow, that's an amazing deal. But I'm also not saying like that's a horrible deal either. Like it's a pretty good phone still. Like I wouldn't like go out of my way to like do crazy things with this device. But I think for the most part, this is actually a pretty decent pickup. And if you own it, I would recommend keeping it for as long as you can. But if you don't own it, I think a phone like a OnePlus 7 Pro may even do you better in the long run. That phone has a lot more features. That phone has a lot more capability at the end of the day with the 90 Hz refresh rate. It's definitely not better in every single category than the Galaxy S9 Plus, but there are some strong suits about it. But with the S9 Plus, it's a crazy good phone. And honestly, if you're lucky enough to get one, I would recommend getting one anyway. So that really pretty much covers it up. Like I said, if you want to pick it up, links are down in the description below. If you guys have any other questions or anything, let me know in the comment section as well. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it means so much if you guys could hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my other channels. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.